I'm vengeance.
Oh boy. I've been looking forward to this one for a while. It's finally time to look at the Medicom MAFEX, The Batman. And when I say a while, I mean this figure was announced in July of 2022. It's now November 2023. I'm finally holding it, but as you may know, there was a little slip up with this figure. Shortly after I got the payment request, people started getting their hands on early copies of this figure, and they noticed that Medicom had erroneously printed a little Marvel copyright thing instead of Warner Bros. DC, and so I had to wait another few weeks before I finally got this in hand. We've seen versions of this Batman released from McFarlane with the DC Multiverse line, as well as Bandai with SH Figuarts. There's also a Mezco version that's due late this year or early next year. I turned the three of them down to go with the MAFEX. So after all that time, let's see if this was worth the wait. As usual, I'll start with a look at the paint and sculpt work. We'll start with the cowl. Two things I was hoping to see are good sculpted stitching in the cowl, as well as that skull-like detail that you could see in the costume. And I'm seeing both here. I'm impressed with the little sculpting details with the sewn together look. And we do see those ridges that give it a kind of skull look there. There's a nice little gleam to the eyes. It doesn't show up the best on camera, but you can see it at some angles. We see a bit of stubble as well. It looks a little dotty up close because it's printed. I like the skin tone, pretty pale. As we look at the sculpt on the suit here, I'll try not to just gush about the design of the suit itself, the movie suit. I'll instead try and focus on the figure itself. But one thing I'll say about the suit is that there's a lot of elements, a lot of plates, and different bits of equipment and things that all come together to bring that Batman look together. And I think Medicom has done pretty good service to that. A lot of different textures and fabrics that they've emulated in the sculpt. We see stitching in the legs there. We take a look at the utility belt. They've nailed that sort of police belt that you see with leather, but different kinds of leather and different textures. Some great painted detail on there. We have the wrists there and the little straps. We've got the army boots. Some splashes of yellow throughout. Looking at the symbol, some really good chipped looking paint. Looking at the cape, they've tried to emulate kind of a leathery look. It's got that sheen that it should have. There have been concerns that this will flake over time, as this kind of material tends to do, the kind of pleathery material. I'm a little worried about that too, but it hasn't happened so far. I guess time will tell. The inside is more of a fabric. It doesn't also share that glossy look of the outer cape. I quite like how it folds into the chest piece there pretty seamlessly. We'll have a closer look at that when I go over the accessories. A lot of different finishes going on. We've got some shine on the shoulder pad. The cowl has the leathery look, while the body has more of a matte finish throughout most of it. The boots do have a tread design sculpted on. We do have sculpted detail on the back, some zippers there, and some more items on the utility belt. I may as well crack this open now and show you where Marvel was printed on the earlier copies of this figure. And there it is, legendary. So initially, this said Marvel. And I guess there was, I don't know if you'd call it a recall, but they delayed the figure release another few weeks, but there are still plenty of copies of this figure out there that still have Marvel printed on it. Overall, I really like the look of it. He holds that frame that you're used to with Pattinson Batman. He has the stature. He has the build. It's a great sculpt work, as usual, from Medicom MAFEX. The cowl looks great. The ears are the right length. They're nice and pointy. Bear in mind that I'm using a pretty bright ring light for this review, so the figure is pretty well illuminated. Let's take a look at interchangeable parts and accessories. We have the big grapple gun. The grapple itself came pretty bent in the packaging. I'll have to throw it under some hot water to straighten that out. He comes with two of the little wrist-mounted grapple guns. Those are just plain black. Along with that, He comes with interchangeable wrists for when he's using the guns. You can see the gun isn't sculpted onto the wrist here, whereas on the default wrist, you can see the gun is on there. So you just pull that whole wrist off, attach one of the grapnel gun holding hands with the grapnel, and you got the full look. A really nice detail there. He comes with a flare. At first I thought this was the syringe, but it is in fact the flare. Not a bad little accessory, but I wish it had maybe like a little smoke effect that came with it, just trailing off of it. He comes with the Batman logo knife thing / batarang. And with that, he has an interchangeable chest piece where the batarang knife has been removed. Now to swap that out, you're just going to want to get a fingernail in the chest piece there on either side and just ease it out. And eventually it'll pop off. And you can see there that the cape is glued in. So this cape is not removable. Would have been a nice option. There are scenes in the movie where we see him with the mask off and the cape off. You can see there are some pegs that just plug into the body. And you just press it in, and he's got the alternate chest piece on. He comes with some great alternate heads. We have this teeth-bared head. I was actually kind of worried about it. In the preview images, it looked really weird. I think it looks okay in person here. Maybe a little weird zoomed up on. But in posing him and taking pictures with this head, I quite like it. We also get two unmasked heads. Here's the first one. I kind of see the likeness, but it's also a bit off. I think the eyes are a bit small. I think they were going for the look from the funeral scene, where he's out and he's socially awkward Bruce Wayne. I did try to put this head on one of my Kingsman MAFEX figures and it didn't fit, but I'm sure there are a few suited MAFEX bodies that you can put this onto easily. We also have this head, which has the eyeshadow and the tousled hair. I really like this. This is probably my favorite of the alternate heads. When you zoom in on it, you do see more of those dots because of the face printing. Bear in mind that this is like 3 to 4 times the actual size of it you're seeing. Looking at it in person, you don't see those dots as much. I like the sculpt on the hair. It looks fairly messy. He also comes with this neck piece that has some neck skin showing. And to go with the unmasked heads, he comes with an empty cowl that you can pose him holding. We also have a couple holsters for the bigger grapnel gun. One holster with the gun inside, and an empty holster. This just clips on with a peg on the side. There's also a peg on the side of his leg that slots into place there. There you go, some more nice stitching sculpt. He also comes with a ton of hands. So he has the fists. We've got these open kind of grasping hands. I've been using them as the cowl holding hands. We have these other kind of action pose hands as well. We have item holding hands. We actually have 2 pairs of these. One pair is for the batarang knife, the other is for the flare. We have trigger fingers for the grapnel guns. Again, 2 pairs, one for the big grapnel gun and another pair for the smaller grapnels. We have these other kind of gestural hands. I think you could maybe fit a batarang in there and pose him like he's about to throw it. And then these hands, which have kind of got me stumped. I don't think they hold any specific accessory. I thought they might be for the knife so he can hold it as if it were a batarang, but it doesn't really fit. I guess if you hold it like that. They can probably fit if you wanted to print off custom Riddler postcards. You could probably slot them in there. But overall, a really good spread of hands and accessories. I can't really think of anything that's explicitly missing. Again, I would have liked to have seen a smoke effect for the flare, so it's a bit more of a dynamic accessory. If you pose him with the flare as it is, he's just holding a stick up. The only accessory I can think of is, as I mentioned before, maybe some little Riddler postcards. But those are easily printed off just with a standard printer. I know the Mezco comes with the wingsuit, but I don't know if I'd ever pose him with the wingsuit. It'd be a cool option, but it would hide the whole design of the suit. It just wouldn't be for me. Move to articulation now. We have a ball joint in the head and neck, which allows for a decent amount of side-to-side movement, really hindered by that collar piece. He can look down a pretty good amount, but he can't really look up. That's about as much as he can look up with just the head. Otherwise, you're going to have to do a Keaton-style kind of angling up of the body. These shoulder pieces are on a hinge, so you can just move them up as you please. A lot of motion in the shoulder here. You can kind of pop it out if you want to have him reaching forward or anything like that, and then it just pops right back in. I really like that action. We also have a swivel at the bicep, the classic double jointed elbow. It's kind of hindered by the design of the gauntlet. Then we have the classic wrist joint, which can revolve like that, and then you can move it in different ways to have the hand oriented in different positions there. There are 2 points of articulation in the body, one in the lower chest and one in the lower abdomen there, so you can move back a fair bit. Some decent ab crunch, not amazing. You can also move him side to side like that. You are seeing some gappage though. No matter how you move him, there's going to be some gaps in there. The upper leg here is kind of weird. When I move it, you can see that top joint doesn't move. Now it is posable. If you keep moving it, you can see you get some movement, but for the most part, this just kind of floats. You get some weird gaps in there. I don't know what the engineering behind this is. It's pretty different from anything I've seen from MAFEX. But you can get movement there. It's just kind of secondary to this weird joint here on the upper leg. Double jointed knees. Another weird point of articulation is the ankle. Normally you just have these really flexible ankle rockers that can pivot side to side. I can get some movement out of this, but I don't know how the joint works, and it can be a little stiff, so I'm afraid to move it too much. But you can see there is some pivot there. But it is rather stiff, and it doesn't move as freely as you'd hope with a MAFEX. And we have the classic toe articulation. We also have an articulated cape. There are 4 wires in the cape, one on either side, and then one here in the middle on each side. With the 4 of these, you can get a pretty good range of motion and some really good poses for the cape. You know, you can have him walking and it's kind of blowing in the wind. You can try and pose him in a flying pose, but the cape isn't very large. Not nearly as large as like the comic MAFEX Batman, for example. I had a bit of trouble finding good ways to pose him, you know, in flying poses with the cape. I'm sure it can be done, but I think this is best suited for having it kind of blow in the wind. There are some really cool poses you can get, taking advantage of all 4 of those. Half the fun of posing this guy for me is just messing about with the cape. On the subject of the cape, I found it difficult to get it in a good, just draped pose. If you want him just standing there with the cape laying on him, you can hold it there and it looks okay like that, but once you let go, it tends to kind of billow out a bit. I think it looks okay on the shoulders. There's a bit of gappage. You can kind of bring them down like that. I think that looks fine. It's just, it doesn't lay as much as I'd like. I assume it's due to whatever coating this is and the fact that it's just fabric at this scale. It's never going to have the weight to it that an actual full-size cape will. Let's look at some size comparisons. I only have a couple of movie Batman to compare this guy to. The first one being the DC Multiverse sad Ben Affleck. Now this is Mattel's DC Multiverse, not the current McFarlane DC Multiverse line. This was a 6-inch line, which I'm pretty sure was Mattel's last dying breath while they still had the DC license. Next up is another Batfleck, and the only other MAFEX movie Batman I own. It's the MAFEX Nightmare Batman from Batman v Superman, released back in 2017. They're about the same height. It looks like the cowl gives the Pattinson Batman a little more height. While I have the Nightmare Batman out, let's take a look at what a difference 6 years makes for MAFEX's face printing. Now the likeness on this Pattinson head isn't great, but the technique is there. And I think it's a much better likeness than Batfleck here. He kind of gives me Billy Zane vibes, and his face is all shiny. Here he is next to the SH Figuarts Andrew Garfield Spider-Man. It's the closest Figuarts I had to hand. And here's the closest Hasbro I had to hand. It is the Adventure Series Indiana Jones. Well, that is the Medicom MAFEX The Batman, and I'm pretty thrilled with it. A really solid base body with an excellent sculpt and some great paint detailing, as I expect from MAFEX figures. On top of that, he's got a really good assortment of different hands, heads, and accessories to complement that. Gives you a ton of posing options. You've also got really good articulation for the most part, And while I haven't handled the SH Figuarts and McFarlane DC Multiverse versions of the Batman that they've put out, I do not regret skipping them. I mean, with McFarlane, I don't collect the line at all, it's just not the scale that I like, and it didn't come with a bunch. Then you have the SH Figuarts version, which is a lot more comparable to MAFEX, and their Batman have just been historically pretty weak. The articulation seemed lacking to me, and that cape with the half plastic and half fabric, I just couldn't do it. This is my favorite on-screen Batman. I had to wait it out for the MAFEX. Of course, it's not perfect. It's lacking in some articulation, the head doesn't have a ton of range, and neither do the ankles. And ankle joints are one thing that you do want to be very mobile, and for this guy, I was worried I was going to break them if I put too much force on them. But on the whole, this gives me most of what I'd want from a definitive depiction of this character in action figure form. It's great to have a few different heads to work with. I'm mostly very happy with the cape, and posing this thing is just a ton of fun. It's gonna look great in most any pose you put it in, and then you have the cape to mess around with, and accessories that you can kind of base your poses around. Before this came out, I was getting some FOMO because I passed up on MAFEX's The Dark Knight releases, and I didn't get a Batfleck in a more basic Batman costume. Now luckily they recently put up for pre-order a new Batfleck from Zack Snyder's Justice League, and I really hope we see some re-releases from the Dark Knight line, because they covered a ton of characters in that. All the major villains, Catwoman, several Batman, several Jokers. They also came with these bonus accessories, so one of the figures came with the Scarecrow Toxin Spooky Batman that you could interchange the parts with and just have that on display. So I'd really like to see them do that kind of thing with the Batman. I'd absolutely be into more MAFEXs based on this movie. Give me Catwoman, give me a Riddler. A Lieutenant Gordon would be really cool, or even a Bruce Wayne. They did produce a Christian Bale Bruce Wayne and an Affleck Bruce Wayne, so I'd absolutely buy a Pattinson Bruce Wayne. Let me know in the comments if you picked this up, what you think of it, or if you went with one of the other companies who made a Pattinson Batman. Are those other ones any good? I know there are a lot of custom replacement parts for the Figuarts that are being produced, different capes that you can switch out, and some really good head sculpts which apparently fit on this MAFEX version too. And if you picked up any of the other movie MAFEX Batman stuff, let me know how that is. I know they came out a while ago, and MAFEX's older stuff can be a little iffy in terms of quality control, but if they do ever re-release their Bale Batman 3.0, I'm 100% going to be getting that. So thank you for watching, and stay tuned, I do have some more stuff coming up.